what's up? Hello, my name is Sarah, and today I wanted to tell you about my journey to New York, just briefly, and then give you guys the 2-month plan that I made for myself leading up to my move. So before I moved, even though I didn't know I was actually going to New York until about 3 weeks before my actual flight, I, in the name of manifesting, just started doing things that I felt would be helpful and get me closer to my goal of moving to New York. So with that, I kind of built for myself, unconsciously at the time, a 2-month plan, a 1-month plan, and a week out from the move date plan. So I hope you find this video helpful, and if you do, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. This is a new YouTube channel, so any support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. Alright, let's get into a bit about why I decided to move to New York. A tad bit about my personal story, but if you just want the 2-month out tips and the 1-month out tips and the week out tips, I will put the timestamps below so that way you can skip this part and get right into the good stuff. Well, I guess my story is good stuff too, but you know what I mean. Okay, so a bit about me. I was born and raised in the Bay Area. And for most of my life, I lived there except for when I went to college in Oregon. I went to University of Oregon, so Sco Ducks. If any of you Ducks are watching, please comment a duck thing below. I would love that. But basically, the time I was in college was the only time I was out of California for the most part, except for like vacations and whatnot. And I really always had the dream of living in San Francisco because growing up, I lived kind of on the outskirts in different areas, but I never got to have that city girl life. So when I was done with college, I came back to the Bay, and I lived in the East Bay for a while, and then I eventually moved to San Francisco, like proper, and I loved it so much, and it kind of fulfilled all like the dreams and thoughts I had San Francisco would be in my head. And it was really fun for a long time. I stayed there about 2 years, or a little over 2 years after college, and it was a great time for me. I think there was definitely a lot of growth, and the city taught me so much. And then after that, I was kind of slowly starting to get over it because I felt like I was always seeing the same people, same places, same vibes, you know, like San Francisco got kind of small to me kind of fast. So I started thinking, like, what if I lived my best, bravest version of myself? And I was thinking, like, okay, I always knew in the back of my head New York would be it. So I actually almost went to college in New York, but at the time, coming from like small outskirt towns outside of San Francisco, I felt like very intimidated, I would say, by New York. I wasn't quite ready for it, and I think deep down I knew it, so that's why Oregon was my choice. But New York just kind of kept like flickering in the back of my mind, and then I went on vacation here for spring break for like a week with my cousin, and it was kind of like a time for me to mentally see, like, does this feel right? Because I'd only been to New York once before for an advertising trip for a week, and that was great, but we stayed in Midtown, and Midtown is like a completely different vibe. It's very touristy, and I don't think it's truly representative of the rest of New York. So I wanted to kind of explore, just see how like my daily life would be, and kind of try and map out how my routine would be, like going to coffee shops, exploring areas I would actually want to live in and whatnot. And during that time, I really fell in love with New York, and I left my vacation not sure if I'd do it or not, but knowing that it seemed like a really fun option. So fast forward a few months, I think it was maybe like 2 or 3 months after my vacation, I couldn't get New York out of my head, and I was like, okay, I have this drive, passion, and excitement out of nowhere for New York, and I don't think it's gonna stop until I actually move. And I felt like I hadn't done anything bold or risky with my life, and a lot of people I knew traveled so much or lived in so many different places growing up, and I kind of wanted to have that experience and see that growth for myself. So I decided that I was going to start manifesting and doing everything I could to propel myself towards New York. So I started applying to a ton of jobs, and then eventually, like a month after applications and various interviews and me really hitting the ground hard in the interview world, I landed my job at Facebook and Instagram, which I'm super grateful for, because I was gonna move here regardless of if I had a dope job or not. Like, I was like, okay, you know, worst comes to worst, like I can just find some job and work it because I just want to be in New York. So then I I found out that I was supposed to move in 3 weeks to New York to start my job. So I moved here September 1st, so it's been a few months now since I've moved because it is February, end of February, and it's been a beautiful, wonderful, amazing ride, and I have zero regrets because I've seen so much growth on myself, and I've kind of tapped into like the adventurous version of myself, and just, I don't know, I just feel like I'm living my best life, you know? Okay. Anyways, let's get into the 2-month tips now that you know my story. Basically had 3 weeks to pack up my life and move across the country, but that sounds dramatic, but because I made this plan for myself and in the name of manifesting I was working towards these things already, it wasn't that bad. So let's get into my New York moving guide. Okay, so if you're lucky enough to have a 2-month buffer period between when you figure out you have to move or you decide you're going to move to when you actually physically find your feet in New York, I would say the first thing to do is book your flight. And obviously you should do this as soon as you know your date. But one thing that I would encourage you to do is to check out credit cards if you feel like you are responsible enough and ready to take on the credit card aspect of paying back debts and payments and things like that, and making sure you can make monthly payments on time just to keep your credit score in a good position and to avoid like racking up debt. But if you feel like you're ready for that, I definitely encourage you to check out getting a credit card that has like some type of flight incentive. For me, I ended up going with Chase and I got the like 60,000 bonus points, and I think when you move, it's really nice because you can use those points, you know, for vacation home in the holidays, or you can put it towards like your next trip somewhere. But you don't realize until you're in it how expensive moving is going to be. Now, I want to share a number up front with you guys so that you can kind of prepare. I would say like overall my moving costs is around like $3,000. But there's also the fees of like getting an apartment. So that was my next tip, was to save. Is to save a lot, because like I didn't realize that, you know, there's gonna be the security deposit the first month, the last month. Sometimes people don't count those as the same thing. Then there's also gonna be the broker fee, which could be equivalent of like a whole month's rent, or 10% of the annual apartment's fee. And that is, again, if you go with a broker, you'll probably be expected to pay some type of fee. Sometimes they're negotiable, sometimes they're not, but just be prepared. So I financially was able to save a good amount of money, and also cashing out on a lot of the PTO I didn't use from my previous job helped me tremendously. I wasn't expecting to have that much, and I realized like, dang, your girl needs to take vacations more often. But having a lot of money saved, I would say, like, if you can, a good ideal comfort zone of savings before moving here is anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000. And I know that is a lot, but trust me, shipping your stuff, especially by airplane, it's like easily around $100 per box, and that is just like your standard shipping, like not even expedited, and that's not even for like overweight boxes, which they'll charge you more, and that's just like your standard like normal size box. So that is one thing to be prepared for. So with that being said, that comes up to my next tip of dramatically decreasing what you own. So once you're in that 2-month buffer, I think that's a really good time to realistically look at all your belongings and say like, okay, if I'm living in a small studio in New York, am I really going to use and like read these like 12 books? And are they going to be worth the space that they take up in my suitcase? Are they worth the fee of like shipping it? So just look at all your stuff and really assess what you need and what you don't, what you could donate, what you could give to friends, what you could sell. Because when you're in the 2-month buffer, I feel like it's less stressful. You know, you're not like, oh God, do I need this? Do I not? And like, it gives you a moment to honestly reflect on whether you want to keep something or not. And for me, I actually kind of did this like the Marie Kondo method. I read her book, and while I failed to actually keep my life organized in her way, I used it for packing. So basically, I would start with like just my books or my knickknacks or all the paperwork and go category by category to sort through what I needed and what I didn't. Also, in the 2-month mark, I would say it's a great time to start selling the furniture pieces that are more like accents or things you don't use every day. So like maybe your nightstand, or if you have an extra bookcase that you clean out once you've sorted through all your knickknacks and things like that, it's now empty. I would say start listing that stuff for sale. I would keep your bed and maybe like a dresser that holds all your clothes until closer to your move out date. but if you start selling those things slowly but surely, it'll help you kind of realize you're decluttering and you won't have to stress about it a week before your move. And I feel like most of my stuff I listed on Facebook Marketplace, and I know in big cities that is a really fast way and efficient way to get rid of your stuff. So I would say try Facebook Marketplace. I know there's also the app Let Go, which is pretty good, but between those and Craigslist, you should be good to go. And with that being said, don't forget to donate too, because there's a lot of great shelters or like foundations in your area that are probably actively taking clothing or furniture or smaller things like lamps, random stuff like that. I think there's lots of shelters in your area, so a quick Google search will help you with that too. I would also say, this is an exciting one, to neighborhood scout while you're in the 2-month period, so that way you can kind of get a feel for where you think you might want to be and where you definitely do not want to move to. So I think a great resource for that is Airbnb Neighborhoods, actually. So they have really great guides. You might have seen them, you might have not, but basically they'll hire a local photographer to go around and take pictures of a specific city, and they'll break it down into smaller, like little, what are those called? I guess suburban zones or like neighborhoods, boroughs here. And the photographer will go and show like the city during the day, during the night, some of the residential areas, some of the little marketplaces, but just to give viewers like a full scope of the city. And then they'll have a writer go in and write about like the Instagram-y places, the cute places, the areas you might not know about within that specific borough. And I feel like those are really helpful when you're neighborhood scouting. You can also look on YouTube, because I found so many videos of people like in East Village or in Chelsea, different areas, giving you a neighborhood guide, and they're pretty comprehensive. So definitely check those out, because that brings me to my last point. You'll also be able to kind of like scout apartment prices. So you might be thinking it's too early to think about this stuff, but like I said, it can be really, really expensive moving into an apartment, especially if the area you're in is like super desirable. It's one, competitive, and two, expensive. So it's good to know in your head, like, okay, if I'm going to be expected to pay 4 times the rent of this 1 month to move in, you know specifically how much you should be saving towards. All right, now we're going to talk about once you've reached a month out, when you're probably like really excited, very stressed out, and just in the middle of this whole process. So I think the first thing that you should definitely start doing is booking your see you laters, your goodbyes, your let's grab lunch, and actually make it a thing. So I would suggest doing this a month out, because I started doing this and I realized like there's a lot of people that I wanted to tell my news to, like face to face. I didn't want them to find out from like an Instagram post or my story or something like that. So if you could start booking your like coffee dates, your lunches, your hangouts, you should definitely start doing that sooner rather than later, because you don't want to leave people on like a cold note and then they find out later and they're like, oh man, I thought we were homies, but I guess not, because they never told me they're even leaving, you know? So just start saying those sooner rather than later. Okay, and then a month out, after you've kind of like sold and decluttered most of your non-essential stuff, I think you should take another assessment and look at all your things that are remaining and see like, what will I need depending on the season that I'm moving to New York? Like, am I going to need the puffer coats or am I going to need the dresses? Because maybe you're fortunate enough to have family or friends that have a place where you can store your stuff that you're not going to need for that first season, because that'll kind of lighten your load and spread out how much you have to pay for shipping. And once you do that, it kind of just helps you figure out, okay, I might need X amount of suitcases, and this is what I'm actually going to be shipping, and this is what I'm going to be saving. It kind of helps you compartmentalize all your belongings. So that helped me a lot, and I realistically actually ended up moving with 5 suitcases, and I shipped a lot of things in like small batches, and that helped a lot because it kind of let me unpack once I did find my apartment without having all this clutter everywhere, and that is definitely an overwhelming feeling, especially if you're in a small New York apartment. Next, I would say go ahead and put feelers out. So I think Facebook actually is a really good resource for when you're moving, because there's countless like Facebook groups about, oh, moving to New York, or New York Gypsy Housing, Friends of Anjou Housing. These are all pages that I'll list in the description box below, but definitely join as many New York apartment and housing places as you can. And I think also if you're part of any like smaller alumni groups or things like that, you should put feelers out. And if you're ready to announce it, you could kind of say like, hey, I'm moving to New York. Does anybody know someone who needs a roommate for X amount of months, you know? And that way you kind of can like increase your odds of living with somebody that you might semi know or knows a friend of your friend. So it kind of helps give you a net. And also, if you can't find somebody that wants to room with you, you'll probably be connected to somebody that like is in your area that you're moving to and wants to grab a cup of coffee, or they want to hang out as soon as you get there. So it's just, I feel like, a nice social thing to do either way. All right, this next one, when you're a month out, is to plan your trip. So you might be so caught up in thinking about like all the stuff you have and all the things you need to do before you move that you forget about that first like week or month or however long it's going to take before you find your apartment. So definitely take a moment to calculate and think about, okay, that first week that I'm there, am I going to rent an Airbnb? Am I going to crash on a friend's couch? Am I going to like shuffle between the two? Because Airbnb bookings, even though it's like for the most part illegal here, they go fast in the surrounding areas or anywhere. But definitely plan that out because you don't want to end up crashing on somebody's couch too long or in a weird situation. So just try and actually think about that and budget it, because my mom and I, we got an Airbnb and it actually turned out to be really sketchy. So then we ended up booking a hotel in Midtown for a week, and there was a ton of shuffling because they kept messing up our reservations, and it ended up costing like probably like $2,000 added to my savings budget, and that was out of the blue. So definitely try and think about that so you can avoid racking up like extra fees and whatnot. I'd also say go ahead and tell your employer a month out or 2 weeks out that you're leaving unless you're sticking with them through New York. I think for me it was important to tell my previous employer like a month out because I had a partner at my old job and I didn't want her to get like the crappy back end of all my work because I didn't prep her or our company enough for the transition. And I feel like that also kind of like shows them that you still have respect for them and keeps the communication lines open for like if you ever need to go back to that company or you need to grab papers, it doesn't end on like a weird note. I would also say at the 1 month mark, cancel your memberships, like your gyms, your subscription boxes, anything you won't be taking with you to New York, because oftentimes when you cancel 1 month out, they're like, okay, this starts on this date, but you still have 1 month left that we're still going to pay you for, and that's like a month after you've already moved or the closeout date that you want. Sometimes you even pay for the first and last month together when you sign up for things like the gym. So just try and close that out to avoid like having extra time that you've paid for after you've actually wanted to cancel. A week out. This is like the exciting, like, holy, what did I just do time period, but just hang in there. It's all gonna be worth it when you move, and just breathe through it, girl or guy. You got this. But my first tip would actually be to get all your paperwork in order. So that's all the things like your W-2s from your old employer, maybe a letter of recommendation from your landlord, because oftentimes the New York market is so picky and busy, and I feel like that kind of just helps, almost like letters of rec. They do the same thing in the job world as they do in the housing. It's just like an added nice bonus. So maybe give your landlord a week to give you a letter of recommendation and how you were as a tenant. If you feel like you guys had a good relationship, that definitely helps in New York. Don't forget to get like all your like health insurance stuff if you're fortunate enough to have health insurance. See how long that's gonna last once you move, or if you need to leave like your old company a forwarding address, make sure you have all your tax paper, the works, and your lease agreement from your old place, all that stuff. Like just try and have all your paperwork lined up in a folder, and that'll help you tremendously, I promise. Okay, and I would say now's a great time to start researching housing, but don't expect that the places you see online will be available next week when you actually touch down in New York, because the market moves so fast. But nonetheless, I would say start researching housing, because then in a way it kind of puts feelers out to the brokers and other people that list places on there that might be like property managers for multiple different buildings and apartments and locations, because if they know that you're coming next week and you need to find an apartment or you want to see stuff, you're interested in this area, they can keep that top of mind, and that way you'll end up seeing a few places and have stuff lined up like even before you get there. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out to those people that are posting and say like, hey, if you think it's a property manager or broker or whatever, you could say, hey, like, I'll be there next week, do you have anything that'll be available Tuesday, and that way you're making those appointments already. And that being said, there are a few websites and resources you can use to find like either low-cost brokers or no-cost broker apartments. So I will list those pages below in the description, but it's definitely worth checking those out because oftentimes those apartments are pretty decent too. if you already have a place lined up through some magical thing of the universe, definitely consider yourself lucky and take this time to go ahead and change your address. You can do it online through the post office. I think it just costs like $1 or something, but I'll link the place that you can do that at, the URL below. But that just helps because any like future paperwork, anything you may need for your new job or your new apartment, it's just good to have it all changed officially, and they could start forwarding your mail starting like I think the next day or something. Okay, you guys, that wraps up my 2-month, 1-month, and a week out plan for how to move to New York. And I know it can feel like so much and so scary, and you're feeling like all these emotions at once, but just hang in there because New York life is amazing. It's fast-paced, it's vibrant. You'll end up finding yourself in unexpected situations in a good way for the most part, with great people and new opportunities. I really do feel like opportunity just flies in the air, and I've thoroughly enjoyed myself so much since I moved to New York. And honestly, I think it was the best thing I did for myself, and I've definitely stepped out of my comfort zone, and that's been beautiful because you find out new things about yourself, you see yourself arise in other like unexpected situations, and I think it's just a great step for like your creativity, your career, your social life, everything, your self-growth. You really find yourself as a person here. So if you have any more questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below or DM me. I'll put my Instagram handle here. But I also have a written out version of this guide on my blog. So if you kind of want to use it as a checklist as you're moving along, go ahead and check out my blog. It's sceneinthecity.com, and that's scene with like SCENE. Anyways, I'll just put the link here. But check that out if you need it as a resource, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll be back with more New York videos soon. I don't want to say every week, but soon. Okay.